Hello, I'm Chris Kallal. I'm a territory agronomist for DeKalb Asgrow here in West Central Illinois. In this video, I'm going to review data on our Asgrow late group 2 and early group 3 maturity products and how they're performing in Illinois and do some positioning for those products for my geography here in West Central Illinois. As I look at this slide here, I'm comparing the late group 2s and the early group 3s in this data cut versus 31 XF3, which is one of our brand new varieties. Okay, so 31 XF3 is right here in the crosshairs. Again, just to explain these, anything above horizontal center, in this case, which is all the varieties, they're all yielding more than 31 XF3. There's nothing below horizontal center, so there's nothing yielding less in this data cut. To the right would be varieties that are wetter than 31 XF3. Anything to the left are varieties that would be drier than 31 XF3. So in this data cut, I'm using 2022 commercial data only, so no breeder data in this data cut, 150-mile radius of Springfield. So you'll notice here versus maybe some of the other videos I've done, the data points are a little bit thinner. Partly because we don't do as many of this maturities testing across the kind of the central band of the state. So some of this data is more coming out of that I-74 to I-80 type corridor. But there is, we're having a little better luck than what we used to, getting people to do these types of plots locally to try to test these maturities, as these maturities have become a little bit more popular in our part of the world. But I did want to preface that. So, as I look here, there's several products that are outshining 31 XF3s. I'll dive more into that here in a minute as we go through the data. And some new products that are showing up quite well. So now let's talk about the products themselves. So I'll start first with 31 XF2. And I would say on farm and in plots for the most part, what few plots we had it in, is having a pretty solid year. It's well suited to that early plant, early harvest, kind of high yield management, gets better as yields climb. So that's kind of really how we've used 31 XF2. It's doing really well at that. In that is once we manage it that way, great standability, pretty true to RM. So a very solid product there that I can see continuing to live on a little bit as we go into 2023. 27 XF1 historically has been one of our key volume products. I would say, solid performance again, generally speaking, on farm, but there is a lot of new blood that is giving it a run for its money and outpacing a little bit as I look at the 2022 data. 31 XF3, so the new 3.1. It's not quite as impressive in this data cut, but if I showed you data for only yield environments above 80 bushel to the acre, I think you'd get a totally different perception of the product. It's much like 31 XF2 in that regard. It does get better as the yield environments climb, is what the data is showing us this year. The EXP data said it had maybe a little bit more guts to it than what we're seeing out of it this year. But at this point, I'm going to kind of say that both 3.1s are kind of interchangeable. And they kind of look kind of one and the same a little bit to me. 33 XF3s, they're having a very impressive year. They look great in this data cut. They're pretty true to maturity. They're broadly adapted. I'm just going to encourage you to utilize the volume of that you can get as best you can, and get yourself properly positioned for some substantial growth in that volume product for 2024. A couple products that I'm just going to mention here real quick that showed up on this slide is 26 XF3 and 28 XF3. Really, neither one of these products were much on our radar, especially 26s. Both of them are having a much better year than we probably anticipated they would. So we don't have a lot of volume of either one of those. Not that maybe we couldn't get our hands on some, but we don't have a ton of volume of either one of those, or very little to none, truthfully, of both of those products. I saved 27 XF3 for last for a purpose, for a reason. As an experimental, the yield numbers it posted were almost unbelievable. It was just stupidly, ridiculously high numbers. And so the data this year, generally speaking, is showing us that maybe that wasn't so crazy. It's having a great year. I do want to emphasize that it is more like a 3.1 maturity product. It is not true to the way it's labeled. For us and a lot of my peers would call it a 3.0, 3.1, maybe even a 3.2 at times. So if you're looking for a true Group 2 soybean, 27XF3 is probably not the product for you. So here, a very similar graph comparing versus 31XF3, but I grabbed some more data just to bring in a few more looks and to get a few more products on the graph. And so in this case, I am including breeder data. So this is commercial data and breeder data, only 2022, and in that same 150-mile radius of Springfield. So you will notice on here, if I call a couple things out versus the previous slide, once I bring the breeder data in, the majority of these products softened a little bit in their advantage or their and how they compare to 31XF3. And that's really not a huge surprise to me because probably a lot of the breeder trials are planted at a later date. The yield levels are a little bit lower, so the discrepancy or the differences between the products probably gets a little bit slimmer at some of those lower yielding or those lower yields. But I did want to call out on here a couple products. 29XF3, again, this is almost exclusively breeder data, having a pretty solid year. 33XF2 shows up on the graph now. 29XF2 shows up on the graph now. So a couple products that show up that weren't on the original. So now let me try to summarize this, maybe put a bow on it in these for these maturities. So in the late group 2s, I said this a while ago, 27XF1 and 29XF2 have been our focus. And honestly, that's where the majority of our volume is at for 2023. And really that's because when we looked at the pre-commercial data or the experimental data, the breeder data, whatever you want to call it, coming out of 2021, most of this new stuff we didn't really feel like it brought us much over what the existing products we had. Now, unfortunately, that's not the way it's playing out in 2022, right? If I look at the data from 2022, pretty much all of the brand new products at this maturity are outpacing our existing products. So that creates a little bit of a problem for us, right? Because 26XF3, 27XF3, 28XF3, 29XF3 are all having a really great year and are outpacing our 27XF1 and 29XF2. The problem is that we weren't counting on that. We didn't ask for them. We didn't have them in our supply plan. And so it may or may not be difficult to go get them and get supply of them. But if you're looking for something new, you can't go wrong with a lot of those products based on the data. I'd say we probably have a little bit higher comfort level with 26XF3 and 28XF3, just on the fact that we had those more broadly in our trials, and 29XF3 was almost exclusively out of breeder data, okay? And again, 27XF3 is not a Group 2 bean. It's labeled a Group 2, but it's not a Group 2. Now, try to put a bow on this and finish this up, because I know I'm getting windy here. On the early Group 3s, 31XF2 and 31XF3 are kind of one and the same. They both like high yields and high yield environments, and they both excel at 80 bushel plus. If that's not your world, those varieties, it's not that they can't perform at lower levels, but they are at their best when yield environments are over 80. So early planting, early harvest, high management, that's what they do great at. 33XF3, I've called it out a couple different times. Standout product. Position yourself well for growth as we go into 2024. And then 27XF3 is truly more like an early Group 3. And again, it'll be a big problem for us. It's almost like a redshirt freshman as we look at this year. So I apologize, I got a little windy on this one, but I did want to dig into the data just a little bit deeper and try to talk about these products. If you do happen to have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Be more than happy to talk to you more, and be looking for my other videos on the other maturities of the DeKalb corn as well. Thanks and have a great day.